Robbie plaque.
Emma.
And these are just some of the physicists. I mentioned 29 Nobel Prizes. These are some of them. And here is Enrico Fermi, who basically discovered that there were elements that were larger than uranium. And these all happen to be artificially produced, or most of them. And then here's Robbie again, who discovered nuclear magnetic resonance, which is why we have MRI, and then several other famous Columbia physicists. Yeah.
Now, where was the Manhattan Project?
Yeah, so the basement down, 5 floors down. So in the basement there was a big cyclotron, and about 10 or 12 years ago they got rid of it. So they sold it for scrap metal. They got rid of the whole thing. Yeah. But there's really nothing to see there. I actually don't even have permission to go to the basement, I think. Wow. So who knows what's there? I don't know. It's fishy, but when you...
And in their biographies or their own reflections in life, did they say, I regret, or I...
Oppenheimer, very much so.
Very
much so. Robbie, again, wasn't involved in the work.
Yes.
Robbie and Oppenheimer, actually, so you've been to my apartment, remember?
Yes, of course.
So Robbie and Oppenheimer, in December of 1945, were in that apartment, because Robbie's family lived in our apartment before we moved there. And Robbie and Oppenheimer in December of 45 discussed the idea that nuclear weapons should be under international control, because if national governments have them, then you could have this chaos.
Yes.
And so, here we are, decades later, still trying to essentially do that, right? Put them under international control and then eliminate them. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So anyway, right. So they produce barium, and it's like, what is this? What is this thing doing here? And then Lisa Meitner saying, what happened was the uranium split in two and produced barium and another element that you haven't detected yet.
Wow.
And then they did that, and there was a big machine called the cyclotron, and they were essentially bombarding uranium with these subatomic particles. Amongst them were the neutrons. And that's called induced radioactivity. So there's such a thing as natural radioactivity, so elements that just on their own, on a specific time scale, split and give off energy. And then induced radioactivity is when you have an element that you bombard with neutrons, and that's what Enrico Fermi won the Nobel Prize for in 1938.
So it wasn't only that process that happened here, it was also then the whole team of scientists came to this building to create.
Right. So some of the planning and but then it did turn west, right? And it was by putting Oppenheimer in charge. Oppenheimer had growing up been going to New Mexico and had fallen in love with New Mexico and would ride horses there and go spend his summers there. And when the idea of actually making a whole lab, and essentially they made a whole city, Los Alamos. When that idea came up, he said, oh, well, let's do it in New Mexico. And that's why they went there. And when they did that, to make Los Alamos, they also moved the local indigenous community, which is called San Ildefonso Pueblo. And so they were some of the very first victims of all of this.
If people ask you, or your students say, is there a good introductory text to tell that story? What do you?
Oh my goodness, that's a really good question. I mean, I read the whole Oppenheimer biography, American Prometheus. This summer, July 21st, is going to be the release of the Oppenheimer movie. It's going to be the first blockbuster to address these issues in God knows how many years. And that's a movie by Chris Nolan. It's going to be big. we don't know. People don't yet know what kind of a take the movie will have. But I think for the community, for people working on these issues, however the movie comes out, right, we can send the right message. The message of destruction and pain and devastation, that's all going to be there. There's no doubt. It's just that even if the movie does not come out being sort of, strongly anti-nuclear, we can continue. We can supplement that
Now,
message.
when is the movie being released?
July 21st.
Okay.
July 21st, and it should be in all the major movie theaters.
Which is just before the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Just before, exactly. And just after the Trinity bomb, so July 18th is the Trinity. And actually, I believe, based on the trailers, that a lot of the film will deal with that period, those days of the test and then the attacks.
Thanks very much.
Now, were you saying that fusion would have been worse?
Fusion is worse. We have hydrogen bombs. So the hydrogen bomb that the U.S. tested in the Marshall Islands, called Bravo, was 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. So much worse. And that's why the devastation in the Marshall Islands, because that was testing, and the contamination. There is no contamination in Hiroshima. If you go to Hiroshima, the contamination is gone. The people have been harmed, but the contamination is gone. In the Marshall Islands, the contamination is still there because it was just so much more.
Because I always learned in terms of energy,
Yes, in terms of energy.
fusion was supposed to be better than fission.
Yeah, fusion is right. So the idea is that for nuclear energy, but this has been going on for decades, that somehow they were going to have clean fusion, but they haven't figured. To have fusion happen, you need really, really high temperatures. And so even fusion weapons, when you have fusion weapons, what they have is they have fission weapon, which creates the high temperature, then that allows the fusion to happen. So those bombs are also quote unquote dirty bombs. They have these fission radioactive materials.
I did read very recently, though, that they now have some scientists are claiming that they have figured out how to have fusion energy.
But
others are saying that
they've been claiming this for decades, and the place where this work is being done is the Livermore lab, which is in charge of our nuclear weapons arsenal. And in fact, this research is all about how you test nuclear weapons without actually exploding them. And so I'm very skeptical, and I Department of Energy in that whole lab.